Hi there BookTube, this is Emma from Emma's Bookish Lifestyle, and today is a book review on Fire Damage by Kate Medina. Apologies for the glare there, that was because it was given to me for a true and honest review through NetGalley, and is the first in a series, although not a debut for this author. The author's debut title was called White Crocodile, which I haven't read. However, this is the first in a psychological thriller series involving a psychologist called Jessie Flynn. Now, first of all, I'll give you a little bit of the premise. So basically, excuse me if I keep looking down, it's because of my notes. Jessie has been asked to basically counsel and look after a disturbed 4-year-old boy. His father's come back from Afghanistan and has got quite severe burns down one side of his body and his face. He was attacked by a petrol bomb while driving, and well, he wasn't driving the vehicle but whilst in a vehicle that was petrol bombed, and he's come back with some quite serious injuries that he's obviously having to live with and get to grips with. One being obviously complete loss of one eye. It's just an empty socket. So when he returns, his wife, in her infinite wisdom, thinks that her son should see him in hospital in that state, and when Jessie finds him, she believes it's just a post-traumatic stress case in regard to the way that he was obviously reintroduced to his father after the incident. When she first meets him at the very opening of the book, it's quite aggressive and quite shocking for a little boy of such a young age to have so much sort of built-in anger and fear and dread, and he's constantly referring to himself as the girl, and seems to be in constant fear of something called the Shadow Man, and for this reason he's carrying around permanently with him a large magnolite torch, which he turns on and shines around and shines in unusual places while he's obviously uncertain of who people are and where they are and what they're doing there. The other aspect to this is a former patient of hers called Ben Callan. Now, he is the Red Cap, part of the intelligence, and is investigating the death of another soldier in Afghanistan that seems to be linked somehow to Major Scott, which is Sammy's father. And they converge, and at that point he asks Jessie, as a former patient of hers, also injured in Afghanistan, if she would come with him while he interviews somebody in regard to the death of this soldier. Sorry, oh, brain gone completely there. I couldn't think of the word for love nor money. Now, when I first started reading this book, it really did jump in feet first. I really liked it. It kind of hit off with a bang. You really meet Jessie quite quickly and Sammy, the young 4-year-old, and everything seems to sort of begin to develop pretty much immediately. And it draws you in at the introduction. And the more characters seem to be brought in, the more tension sort of begins to build, and a lot of sorry for the and a lot of interest it begins to build, and a lot of hopes and anticipations as to where this story is going to go. Unfortunately, although this book was very easy to read and I really did feel at times it was very, very good, it also at times felt extremely formulaic and somewhat lacking in originality. There are a lot of authors out there now doing thrillers, psychological thrillers, and it is a genre in its own right, but just wasn't 100% there for me. I really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't 100% there for me. The writing was good, the pacing was good. I did often wonder to myself, as I was drawing near the end of the book, is it really necessary for this character, Jessie Flynn, to... Apologies there, just had to move the dogs. They were trying to get in front of the camera. I did wonder, and I would love to know your thoughts on this, if you feel it's necessary for psychological thrillers to necessarily be part of a drawn-out series or a series of events occurring to one character. With this, I wasn't so sure. Jessie Flynn was a good character. There was obviously history there. There was history that was described and involved sort of explaining some of her actions and interactions with people throughout the book and why she was the way she was with people. But also on the other side of things, I felt it didn't necessarily have to mean that there was going to be anything else to her in future books. I didn't find her an amazingly astute psychologist. And yeah, there was just something, and I just wonder sometimes if authors feel compelled or are asked if their books can go beyond a one-off book. I do think sometimes books should be left as a standalone book rather than a series, and I would love to see more standalone thriller series for that reason, basically, because if it's a really good book, you will go back and read more and more from that author, irrespective of whether it's got the same character in it. Don't get me wrong, I didn't dislike the character of Jessie Flynn, but I wasn't overly converted into the fact that I felt she should have a massive series of books. To contradict myself completely there, I would still like to read the second book, which is Scared to Death, just to see if there is any adaptation, if how the author approaches the situation, and where things go on. But if it's same old, I'm not likely to go further to book 3. But I do like to give authors the benefit of the doubt, and as I say, this is Katie Medina's second book. Her first book got very well received reviews, but on Goodreads she's still only averaging about 3 stars. And to be honest, for this book, I would say that's perfectly understandable and the correct rating. One other thing that I did want to note on this book was, unfortunately, this was one of those books where there was a degree of insta-love. Not that it was instant insta-love, but it was so obvious, very, 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 very early doors, that Jessie and Ben had an attraction to each other. And it's very, very obvious that in future books this is going to be expanded on. And I don't necessarily feel that books need to have romance in them. I know there are a lot of romance authors out there, and there's a lot of booktubers who enjoy romance, and I'm not poo-pooing it. I enjoy a good romance as well, but sometimes I just wish that a thriller is a thriller and it didn't have to have a love interest and some kind of affair or something like that. I just felt as well that the attraction was a bit meh and a bit unnecessary and almost a little bit forced. Again, part of this formulaic feeling that some binding connection has to be there between them. There was also one particular scene in the book that I really didn't appreciate and felt very angered and disgruntled by, and that was a scene where there is an interaction between Jessie and a gentleman in the pub. Obviously I don't want to spoil it, but if you do read that book, that particular element of the book just felt completely unrequired and unnecessary, very negative to women, completely removed any strength of character that had already been built up on Jessie, and kind of lost me a bit of respect for her as well, to be honest with you. Not because what she did was wrong, but just it felt very, very, very ill-timed and inappropriate to the situation that she was having to deal with. You know, she's got this very young 4-year-old boy who desperately needs her help, and this incident has to occur both by the author's intent and also by her intent, and I don't think it was necessary on either person's half. So it would be interesting to see what other people think if they do read this book. Basically, in conclusion, I felt that the ending was a bit panicked and rushed, and it did tie up all the loose ends, but it felt a bit lacklustre, a bit unsatisfactory to me, and a bit twee, you know, a bit. And they all lived happily ever after. Not that I'm saying that they did all live happily ever after, but you know what I mean. It was that kind of twee sensation, that feeling of, really, you know. So there were a couple of instances where punishment just didn't seem to be given where I felt it should have been. There was one particular character who literally kind of got away with murder, and there was no real explanation as to why he did or why he didn't get charged for what had happened. The incident with regard to Jackson, this other soldier who was murdered in Afghanistan, kind of semi-resolved, but again, I didn't feel like there was any real strong resolution out of it. It was nice to see the progress that Sammy was making in his new home. However, again, a little bit twee, like everything could be immediately turned back to normal overnight, when in fact, you know, any child that's been through some trauma to that extent that he had I can't imagine would instantly recover in the way he had, irrespective of improved surroundings. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd like to get her second book and see if some of the kinks have been worn out, and that, you know, maybe Scared to Death is a bit more smooth running. Maybe she's now got to terms with her characters and the way that she wants to lay out the story, and, you know, that the threads, when they do come to that conclusion at the end, don't get tied off in a pretty bow really, really neatly, but in a kind of frustrating, almost unresolved manner. And as I say, I mean, I did really enjoy it. It was a good thriller, but it wasn't a wow me thriller. If you want a wow me kind of edge of your seat police thriller type thing, I would definitely recommend Kill the Father, which I've previously reviewed, and we'll leave a link down below and up here. But yeah, I mean, that's my review basically. I hope it's of interest to you. I'd like to know your thoughts, especially your thoughts on thrillers, and whether you feel that the genre has become extremely formulaic, whether you like to have a long, ever-growing series, or whether you prefer one-off standalone stories that come to a conclusion, or whether you like a bit of both. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't like a series, but I tend to find more times than not, I don't go to the thriller genre because it is part of a series and you're 20 or 30 books down the line, and I really don't want to start at book one. But that's just my opinion. If it was a good author and a phenomenal series, and, you know, by all means, if you know any recommend them down below, then I would consider it. But also sometimes I find that after sort of 4 or 5 books, the series kind of feels drawn out and feels very much like you've read a similar book before. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your time. Apologies for it being 15 minutes. I was hoping to try and keep it under 10. But let's chat in the comments below, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care for now.